Hey everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. You know, the weather's turning really cold. Yesterday it was 80 degrees, today it's like 50 degrees. Seriously, it's turning cold and it's turning cold fast. So that's the time that I pull up my big pot and I start making soup. And one of our family's favorite soups is something they call yellow chicken soup. It's really kind of a Asian flavored chicken soup, but it's really, really good, and it has a few elements to it that just make it stand out above your regular chicken noodle soup. It's definitely not regular chicken soup. So let's get started. The main thing that we need to start with is the flavor base. And it's really important that you use fresh ingredients, okay? I brought this soup one time to a potluck. It was kind of a soup and chili night, and one of my friends said, "You've got to give me that recipe." So I gave her the recipe verbatim, and I told her, don't substitute the fresh spices and the herbs with anything powdered. Make sure it's all fresh. Okay. So she made it, and she came back and she says, "You know, it didn't turn out very well. I don't know what I did different than you, but it wasn't anything like you made." And I said, "Well, did you use all fresh ingredients?" "Well, I didn't have fresh garlic, so I used powdered." I said, "Well, that could make a big difference." And I said, "Well, what about the other ingredients?" "Well, I didn't have fresh ginger, so I used powdered ginger." "Well, that'll make a huge difference." And it turned out that she didn't use anything fresh. She used all powdered spices. Now, I really like to have powdered spices around, but for this particular soup, it makes a huge difference to use fresh. So start out with some fresh ginger. Here's kind of our flavor base. We have some fresh ginger, and I just have peeled it, peel all the outside skin. It's about a 2-inch piece of fresh ginger. And then I have about 5 cloves of garlic, a jalapeno pepper, a couple of fresh limes, and some Hungarian style paprika. You can use regular paprika, but I really love Hungarian paprika, so if you can find it, that's what I recommend. So we're going to start by grating our ginger, and you really do want to grate this. You don't want to chop it fine, because then you just end up with some little chunks of ginger, and it doesn't infuse into your soup like you want it to. So I'm just using a little microplane here. If you don't have a microplane, if you have a regular box kind of grater, you know, the kind that you stand up and it has different grating surfaces on the different sides. If you find the one that looks like little circular gratings, that's the one that you want to go for. You just want to grate that ginger, and ginger is rather fibrous. And this helps break down those fibers, kind of gets the ginger juice out of it. You just grate it down. You want to have a good tablespoon, and you'll have something like looks like this on the back of your grater, and that's exactly what you're looking for. All right, just kind of mushy ginger. It smells wonderful. You get a little bit of the juice there. Just scrape it off, and you want a good tablespoon of your grated ginger. All right, you can just set that aside. You're going to use that again in just a minute. And then, of course, your ginger, don't need to grate your ginger, just need to mince it up fine. Actually, you know what? I'm going to press the ginger today, because just like, or I'm going to press the garlic today. Just like the ginger, you want it really finely minced and pressed so it infuses all of its natural flavors into your soup. Alright, so let's grab our handy garlic press. And hopefully you have a handy garlic press. I'm just going to, since these are all peeled already, right, been sitting out from the freezer for just 10 minutes or so. See how easy that just pushes right through that press. And adjust your flavor base. You know that I like garlic, so I'm using 5 good large cloves of garlic, and it's giving me a good tablespoon of freshly pressed garlic. Just Just use this little thing to scrape it off. You know, you could also press ginger if you have a garlic press. It's kind of difficult. You have to use a lot of hand power, but it is doable to use your garlic press for a ginger press. Alright, set that aside. Alright, so now we have our grated ginger and our pressed garlic, about a tablespoon of each. And to that we're going to grate the rind of 2 limes. And you can see these limes are rather small, so if you have a big lime you can maybe just use 1. But these are organic limes, and any time that I'm going to grate a citrus zest and to use it in any of my recipes, I like to look for organic citrus, because then I know that there's no pesticide residue on it. I'm not getting anything into my soup that I don't want to be in there. Just going to take your microplane again, and when you zest citrus, you don't want to go any farther down into the peel than just the outside layer. Don't go into the white part called the pith, because it's not going to give you a good flavor. So you just kind of turn your citrus as you grate it. Now you might have a zester, you can use that. I find that my microplane does a really good job. Just gets that outer layer. See, I'm just getting the outer layer, not going deep. Okay, and you'll see it on the, it's smelling absolutely divine in here. Very exotic kind of smells. So good. This really makes a big difference in this recipe. So make sure you don't take shortcuts here. If you have dried orange peel or lemon peel, or even if you have some dried lime peel, don't be tempted to use it. Use the real stuff. Alright, that's 1. And that has given me about a teaspoon of rind, just to give you an idea of how much you should have. Look at this other one. The soup is such a great thing to make on a cold day. I'd eat it no matter what the temperature was outside, but it's especially nice on a cold day. Make up some fresh breadsticks to go along with it. It's a great meal. One that everyone loves. It's kind of an addictive soup. Usually 1 bowl is not enough. It's chunky and the broth is just so flavorful. Alright, so there's our lime. Just get that zest off your grater, or if you've used a zester, just put that right in there. Alright, so now we have our limes that all the peel has been grated off. Just going to cut that in half and squeeze your limes right into that mixture. Get some good lime juice in there. Limes usually don't have any seeds in them. If they do, you want to maybe use a citrus press or juicer to catch any seeds that may be in there, but these limes are seedless, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay, that's about a tablespoon of lime juice from that lime. We're kind of in between citrus seasons in October. Just coming into the height of the citrus season. It's just about starting now. Alright, that's given me probably 2 tablespoons of lime juice, and that's all I want. I can always add some lime juice later, but you can't take it out, so I don't want it to be too limey. Okay, to this I'm going to add about 4 teaspoons of that paprika, and that's going to not only give it a punch of flavor, but it's also going to give it a wonderful red, rich color. Alright, let's just give that a stir. See that? And this is a flavor base that we're going to heat up in our pan in just a minute as soon as we get this jalapeno pepper. Now, if you are anti-spice, leave the jalapeno out, all right? But you'll find that the jalapeno, it will mellow as the soup cooks. So it may seem hot when you first put it in there, but it will mellow. The heat will break down some of the heat of the jalapeno pepper. Something I like to do, and if you're brave or you don't mind chilies, you feel free to do this, but I want to see how hot my jalapeno is to see if, do I want to take the seeds out? Do I want to leave the seeds in? It all depends on how hot this pepper is, because not all jalapenos are actually hot. Some are very, very mild, so I want to see how this one is. So I just take my finger, kind of rub it on this cut surface, and give it a little taste. And I feel nothing on my tongue. Nothing there. So this is a very, very mild jalapeno. Or I'm just beginning to feel something. So I'm going to go ahead and take the seeds out of this jalapeno, not to make it too spicy. I can always add a little cayenne pepper later if I want to. But it's really where the seeds and those white ribs, where the heat is in peppers. So I'm going to take them out. Just take a little spoon and lay it down. And if you're really sensitive to chilies, put a glove on, or stick your hand in a plastic bag as a little glove before you do that, because your finger is going to be a little hot. And if you forget and then rub your eyes, it's bad news. All right. Okay, so I'm going to take my jalapenos and I'm going to cut them into really thin strips, and then cut those strips into very fine dice, and mince. Okay, like I said, if you have tender skin, you might want to put gloves on when you work with chilies. Really finely minced, real fine dice. Okay, you want just little pieces of that jalapeno in your soup. You don't want big chunks. Nobody wants a big chunk of jalapeno in their bite of soup. All right, put that in. Okay, and I'm going to use a whole nother half here. You can use however much or however little, depending on your family's taste. We're kind of a hot family around here. We like things with a bit of spice. So this to us is just right. This won't be any heat at all. But if my sister were here or my dad were here, they probably wouldn't be able to eat this, because they think it was way too spicy. So judge what your personal tastes are there before you add chilies. Alright, remember, if you haven't used gloves, you need to go wash those hands before you rub your face or anything. So you'll find out how hot that chili is. It's usually not a good thing. Alright. So we have that rich flavor base. It's got that grated ginger, the pressed garlic, about a tablespoon of each of those, about a tablespoon, a little more than a tablespoon of Hungarian style paprika, a couple of tablespoons of fresh lime juice, a couple of teaspoons of freshly grated lime zest, and a jalapeno pepper that's been chopped up. And what we do with this is we get it started in our pot. We're going to get that lit, get it heating up. I'm going to go give my hands a wash before I rub my eyes. Okay. Now lately a lot of the recipes I've been making have used coconut oil as the oil of my choice for sauteing the onions and this flavor base. And today I'm again going to use that coconut oil. Now, I'm not trying to push you on coconut oil. It just happens that I love that little flavor of coconut that comes with the coconut oil in dishes like this. It really adds a lot of flavor and just gives that background hint of coconut that just pairs wonderfully with this dish. So that's why I'm using it. If you don't have coconut oil, use regular old canola oil or some vegetable oil of your choice. I wouldn't recommend olive oil in this. So I have about 2 tablespoons of coconut oil, or 2 tablespoons of whatever oil that you want to use. Get that in your pan. You don't want to heat your pan up too hot. A little medium-high heat, maybe medium heat. We're going to add our flavor base after. Alright, pan's nice and hot. Alright, I have about 2 cups of finely diced onion in here. You choose however you'd like to chop it. If you like a big chunky soup, more like a chowdery kind of soup, then leave your onions more chunky. I like my onions a little bit more fine, so I cut mine into a smaller dice. But it's about 2 cups of whatever kind of onion you want to use. Use about 2 cups of it. That is 1 really big onion or a couple of smaller onions, but 2 cups of onions, and that's just going to go right into our hot pan. Alright, let's give that a stir around. Don't have your heat up so high that you brown your onions. Keep it low enough that you just want to cook your onions without browning them. It's called sweat your onions. Just get them to start releasing those juice. Soften up a bit. Alright. And cook that about, I give that about 3 minutes in the pan of cooking. And while that's cooking, before we add our flavor base to it, let's cut up some celery. That's going to be the next thing that goes into our pan. I'm using 2 stalks of celery, and I just like to roughly chop my celery. You can dice it, but I just cut it across the celery. I like to have kind of chunks of celery in my soup. I end up with about a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of celery. And there's nothing that says you can't add less or more celery. Celery is just part of that flavor base. It's not really potent. You'll miss it if you don't have it there. But if you add a little bit more, that's okay. And give your onions a stir every once in a while. Make sure they're not getting brown. You see how those are just cooking without getting brown. Alright, sweating your onions. Alright, I'm just going to use my onion bowl. Put my chopped celery in there. And for this recipe, I don't bother taking off the leaves or the top part of the celery because it goes well in the soup. Alright, we also need to chop up some potatoes. Now I'm going to leave my potatoes a little chunkier. Maybe 1/2 inch dice or so. That's the way I like them in this soup. That way it won't take terribly long for them to cook, but they'll be big enough that I can really get in there with my spoon and scoop them out of my bowl when I'm eating. Alright, those onions, I can smell them. Alright. Now to the onion mixture, we're going to add this flavor base that we've made up. Alright, just put that right in with the onions. Alright, we're also going to add a bit of salt to this, about a teaspoon. You want to be careful with the salt here because we're going to be adding some chicken broth to our soup. And if you're using regular chicken broth or a bouillon cube, it's going to be very salty. So be careful with how much salt you add here. Remember that trick I've told you about potatoes and too much salt? If you find that it's a little more salty than you'd like, you can add those potatoes and it will take up some of that salt. So all is not lost if you add a little bit too much salt. Alright, we're going to put I know that my chicken broth is not salty at all. It's very low sodium. So I'm putting a good teaspoon of salt in there. And give it a stir. And you're just going to let that cook up. Just release the flavors of those fresh herbs and spices in there. It's smelling really good in here. Alright, I also have a 15-ounce can of diced tomatoes, and I've just run them through a food processor and kind of pureed them just a little bit because my family, they don't like big chunks of tomato. Now, if your family doesn't care about that, just put the can of diced tomatoes right from the can into your pot here. But this is just one can, 15-ounce can of diced tomatoes. I'm just going to add that to our pot and give it a stir. All right. And let that stew for a bit and get back to our potatoes. Oh, I'm using about a pound of potatoes, and that's kind of a good place to start. This is a very forgiving kind of recipe. If you don't have potatoes, you don't have to put a potato in there. You can leave it out. There's enough other good stuff in here. But I usually have potatoes. These are actually the last of a very large bag of potatoes that I've had around. So I'm kind of glad to see them go. Alright, it's boiling away there. The next thing that we're going to add to our pot is that celery that we diced up. Just add that right in there. Give it a stir. Alright, we're just softening up the celery a little bit. That. Sometimes tomatoes in the can have things in it. Parts of tomatoes that you don't necessarily want in your soup. Alright, it's going to bubble away. And this is just going to cook, just cook it for like a minute or two. We're going to continue cutting up potatoes. Soften up those celery just a little bit. A couple more potatoes to cut. Nice and chunky. This is a homey kind of recipe. You don't have to have your things cut just so. That's what I like about it. You see something that looks a little out of sorts, just cut it up some more. All right. Now to our pot, we're going to add 6 cups of chicken broth. Now I highly recommend that you go and you get some really good chicken broth. If you can get the organic kind, it's really good. It's worth it. But at least get the low sodium. I like to get the kind that come in the boxes, the vacuum sealed boxes, but you can use bouillon. Alright, I've just made up some chicken broth. It's 6 cups of chicken broth. I'm just going to add that to our pot. You want to make sure you have a pot big enough to handle all the stuff that we're going to be putting in here. Alright. Just going to turn up our heat just a bit. Really get that going. I'm also going to add a cup of frozen corn in here. It's looking great. And then I'm going to add the potatoes. Okay, I'm also going to give this a taste for the salt. Wow, that is really good. I'm going to add just a little bit more salt. You have your broth in here, so now's a good time to salt it before you put the potatoes in. Remember, those potatoes are going to soak up a lot of that flavor and a little bit of the saltiness, so you can always add more salt later. Have people salt their own bowls of soup, but I can tell mine just needs a little bit more. And we're going to add those potatoes right in. Chunky kind of soup. Alright, we're going to add these potatoes in, and I'm going to put the lid on, bring it up to a boil, and as soon as I hear that lid bubbling around, I'm going to turn it down to low and let it cook until those potatoes are soft. And that will take about 15 minutes or so. That is looking really good. Alright, and while we're getting that back up, I'm just going to cut chicken. I have about 1.5 pounds of chicken breast. And I'm just going to cut this. I'm not cutting any more vegetables, so now I'm going to cut my meat on my cutting board. I'm going to cut it in about 1-inch cubes or so. Now if you want to make it go a little farther or cook a little faster, then cut your chicken smaller. Maybe not 1-inch cubes, that's a little big, isn't it? So maybe 1/2-inch cubes. Let's make it go a little farther. I was making a chicken stew now. I keep them nice and big. About 1/2 inch is good. Then you don't have to, you can get some chicken in every bite. So that's good. Now this isn't a chicken noodle soup. There's no noodles in this. We have our potatoes and our corn as our starch in there. Don't really need noodles. Alright. That to the side. Alright, I'm going to keep cutting up my chicken into 1/2-inch cubes. Let that come to the boil. Let it cook for about 15 minutes. And then we'll add our chicken and some finishing touches. Now remember, don't let your chicken set out on your cutting board while you're waiting for your soup to cook. Cut it up, put it in a bowl back in the refrigerator while you're waiting. Keep it nice and cold. Kitchen safety, right? Don't want to make anybody sick. Alright, so I'm going to continue cutting my chicken and cooking my soup, and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes. Okay everyone, it's been a little bit longer than 15 minutes because what I did is about 10 minutes into it I checked my potatoes and they were just getting fork tender, and that's the time when you want to add your chicken cubes. So I added my chicken cubes, and I continue to cook my soup for probably another 10-15 minutes. Again, I'm at high altitude, so it's going to take a little bit longer for my soup, but you just want to cook that until your chicken is nice and tender and your potatoes are nice and soft, and then turn off the heat. And then we're going to add the finishing touches to our soup. We're just about done and ready to dig in. All right, cilantro, of course. What would this soup be without cilantro? Well, again, if you don't like cilantro, you can use parsley. It's not going to be the same flavor, but you'll still get that pretty green herb color in there. But I absolutely love cilantro, so that's what I'm going to use today. And I just rough chop it. I'm going to chop about 1/4 cup. And I don't want to chop it too fine because I want some leaves to remain in my soup. Alright. And this is to your own taste. Again, as always, that's why we do our own cooking, right? So we can make it to our own liking. Alright. Put that in there. You want to have this off the heat. But you don't really want to cook your cilantro, you just want the residual heat of your soup. And then the last thing we're going to finish it off with is some milk. I like to use canned milk. You can use half and half. You can use light cream. You can use just regular table kind of milk, but I like a little richer taste. All right. I start with about half a can. Yum. All right. This will cut any spiciness that happens to be in there. You know, I think I'm liking half a can. You can give it a taste. All right, let's give it a taste. Don't burn your tongue. That, to me, is perfect. Still has all of those rich flavors, but just a hint of that milk in the background. It's really good, creamy, but not at all heavy. So I think this is ready to serve. Again, I would serve this with some breadsticks, some sourdough bread, some focaccia. Some cheesy focaccia would be excellent. All right, how chunky that is. I love the broth. Sometimes we fight over the broth around here because it's so good. So flavorful. Get a few more chunks of chicken in there. All right. This is ready to serve. Bon appetit. I think you're going to love it. See you next time.